put it into the surplus, the large surplus, and earmark it for post 2024. The federal funding ends in September of 2024. So whatever funding we can save between now and then would be earmarked so that in the future, if we need to replace Chromebooks in the classrooms, we need to replace smart boards, anything like that. Or if the board wants to give supplement to teachers, if the sales tax is dropped and you want to continue supplements at the current level, there'll be a fund there to dip into that's specially created just for that, based on savings that we accumulate over the next 2 years, so, or 2.5 years. So, just an FYI, that's the plan moving forward. Okay.
You said a warehouse also?
Warehouse, 800,000 for the warehouse.
Yeah, I know it's gonna be central located. We have all this property right here, that's an idea. I know we basically lose the center of the parish, but I mean, we have all this property right here.
Yeah, discuss that in Lowe's Hill.
Yeah.
We just got the word on the phone, so
Yeah, I mean,
we haven't, we're gonna come back to the board with approval to get designs and that kind of thing, but when this building was built, the driveway on the side right here and in the back is all rated for delivery trucks, 18-wheelers and delivery trucks. So what I would probably recommend doing is locate that warehouse on the property that we own behind here with a loading dock, conference room, also to receive technology, computer smart boards that have to be, you have to have programs on them, where the IT folks could work on stuff and be secure and locked, and also have a loading dock, and you have a surface that's rated for delivery trucks that will be right up to the edge of it. So, we have, like I said, we haven't gone to an architect yet, but that's kind of it. So, okay, the next thing is we have, one of our nurses was nationally, or nominated for national recognition. There was an article in the Text News a couple weeks ago. Miss Stephanie Lochley. Is Stephanie here? You want to come forward? Okay, the article in the Text News that Mr. Henry Clay so graciously put in indicates that she was nominated by her principal, Ms. Jessica Landry, and she's nominated for a national award, National Life Changer of the Year Award. So, Ms. Lochley, congratulations. Okay, one last thing, you'll notice that Ms. Liz put a copy of the 18 listings for the first 9 weeks of school on your desk, so if you have an opportunity to take a look at it, you'll
I have a
notice.
question. My next question.
Yeah.
I noticed I was looking for a name, Strawberry High.
Nobody.
Nobody. Is that true?
They didn't include us in it, is what you're saying? I don't have the list you're talking about.
Well, they have 0 on my, everybody else got like maybe 20, 30, 40.
We recognize some kids today with, 18 and honorable.
Well, what I'm saying is,
It's not there.
see some names.
I'll find out why it wasn't included.
I don't see names on any of them. I'm not a voter.
That's Strawberry High.
Normally, those can be run from the JPEG, computer program. It must just be an oversight.
It's probably a print shop.
There's gotta be a full site.
It's got to be an oversight or something.
Again, it's probably the print shop. It's in
You know, they can, the list can be run from the central office, it's probably just an oversight.
Oh, I definitely want to look at that.
We'll provide it for you in the next meeting.
None of the high school.
Okay, that completes the announcements.
Only one student?
That's what I'm saying.
Well, I'm saying, we don't have nothing 9, 10, 11.
Yeah.
No, we recognized students today with,
Yeah.
You know you turned it in.
I don't know if I did. I need to find out.
They don't have to turn it in, it's run automatically.
It's
Oh,
not-
if it was run automatically, then that's a false start.
If you have
We have 12 grades.
All right. It's getting with that.
The secretary runs the list from what the administrator sends. She doesn't pull it anywhere past herself.
Okay.
Because she just wants to verify with the counselors. So, I don't know, anything could have happened, but, you know.
That completes the announcement.
All right, Sunscript employee of the month.
Our Southern Scripts employee of the month is Miss Melanie Bell. Miss Bell, I don't know if she's here. Miss Bell is a teacher at Stevensville Elementary. Mr. Sherman, her principal, recommended her. I've observed Ms. Bell's class several times. She teaches at the middle school level at Stevensville Elementary. She does a wonderful job in working with the students there. So Ms. Bell, congratulations.
Okay, is there any addition to the agenda? Only, no? Okay, I know that we have number wrong there. Number 3 should be before number 2, huh? Full item from consent.
Yes.
Kind of public. Do anyone have, any question about the consent agenda before? If not, then we will vote on the consent agenda.
Move to accept consent agenda?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Abraham, second by Mr. Vito. Vote. Stand nay, motion carried. Finance committee recommendation. Motion shall be item A through D. Report out C. Motion by Mr. Forte, second by Mr. Steve, all in favor? Vote. No nays, motion carried. New business. Item A, consider approve Head Start Policy Council recommendations. That's Ms. O'Neill.
So we did have our policy council meeting in October, and so next step is for us to present to the board what was on the policy council agenda. And so you received your packet, we have our policy council new officers, we had our bylaws we discussed, we approved, new hires, you had the hire list that were highlighted in orange in your packet. We set our policy council meeting dates and times, which we're moving to every month. And then in our normal policy council meeting, they approved the 21-22 application, which y'all had already approved that because we had not met. So nothing really out of the ordinary in.
Any question?
I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, sir.
You did say, when I asked a question about those students who will not be, have access to that.
Mhm.
Okay. I think it'd be a good idea if someone would write the proposal. I feel certain we have some funds that are available, but non-historic.
Yes, I can actually look
Last time
into,
I looked at the ARP link, I believe it is. I think we had like $25 million that are available, that needs to be spent or return to work, right?
that I'm not aware of.
In your spare time.
Yes, but that's something to consider so that the 5 schools that do service pre-K to offer them some kind of consultative services that aligns to the same way that Head Start does. I can actually look into that.
Okay, we got a motion by Mr. Forte, second by Ms. Vito, all in favor, vote. No nays, abstaining, motion carried. Consider approved COVID procedures. Mr. Blanchard.
Ms. Wendy's gonna put a slide presentation up there for me. Okay, since the COVID pandemic began in the March 13th, 2020, we've gone through a lot of different things. We had to implement a lot of rules and do a lot of things differently around the district. So I just wanted to go through a brief timeline on the requirements, how things have progressed, and what I'm gonna recommend to the board later on in the slideshow. Okay, Now, we've had to implement a lot of things since this started, based on information provided to us by the Department of Health, by the governor, and by other entities. A lot of the decisions we've made have been based on what those requirements are, what those recommendations are. Throughout that process, people have questioned what we've done, but I've always worked with legal counsel, communicated with other superintendents, tried to do what was in the best interest of the district, while keeping safety and security for the staff in mind, as well as trying to keep students in school. Last year, the 2021 school year, we had a mask mandate from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. In May, the governor came in and lifted the mask mandate effective the last day of school. So for our summer programs, our students did not have to wear masks. Come August, the numbers were spiking again, so the governor reinstated the mask mandate. Now, they changed some of the quarantine guidelines from the year before. Before, we used the 6-foot rule in quarantining students, and they went to a 3-foot rule in buildings. They kept the 6-foot rule on the buses. When all of that was in effect this year, we had a lot of students on quarantine. I called a lot of names and all sorts of nice stuff. But we had to follow the rules. Every district in the state was following them. You can't ignore the mask mandate. You can't ignore the COVID rules. You have to follow them. If you don't follow them, you open yourself up for litigation. There's state legislation that protects districts that was passed in the summer of 2020, where if you follow the recommendations of the Department of Health, you are exempt from lawsuits and whatnot. When you step away from those guidelines and you don't follow them anymore, you open yourself up to potential litigation. Now, in Louisiana, our insurance companies are still covering us. I've checked with our carrier and we're still covered in lawsuits and whatnot. But in other states, insurance companies are beginning to back away from coverage. If districts don't follow the guidelines, then their insurance companies are not covering them in the event of a lawsuit. So the district has to assume that liability. If they lose in court, the district has to pay it. So it's important that we stick to the guidelines. Okay? Now, the rules were pretty strict at the beginning of the year and they caused a lot of quarantines. In some cases, and I'm going to get to that in the next slide. In mid-September, the Department of Health revised the quarantine rules on buses from 6-foot close contact quarantine down to 3-foot close contact. That was pretty significant because about half of our quarantines were coming from close contact on the buses. We are allowed to operate at 100% capacity on the buses, but everybody has to wear a mask. It's a national presidential mandate. Cutting that quarantine or that close contact distance in half made a huge difference. In October, the state superintendent came in and allowed parental choice for quarantine. We still have to wear the mask, we still use the 3-foot rule, but under that new rule, the parents have the choice. If a child is identified as a close contact of a suspect case or a positive case, the parent has the choice whether or not to quarantine the child at home. They can't send them to school. That is the rule we're following now. Okay. In late October, about a week and a half ago, Governor Edwards lifted the mask mandate, but he didn't lift it completely. Okay. If you lift the mask mandate in your school system, you have to go back to the 6-foot quarantine rule, okay, for close contacts, which means we would be going back to that wider circle around the students, and you'd have to quarantine all these people. The parental choice is no longer an option if you remove the mask. Next slide. Okay. August and September saw a large number of quarantines, even with the 3-foot rule. At times, we had over 5% of our student body quarantined, in some cases, well over 400 students. During that period of time, I got a lot of calls from parents, and the biggest complaint from parents was, this is the second time or third time my child has been quarantined. With an older kid, they can stay home, but when it's a younger kid, very often the parent is required to stay home. You can't leave a 6 or 7-year-old kid at home. If people don't have extended family they can rely on, they have to miss work to stay home and take care of the child. So that is a very big concern for parents. and it was a very big concern for me in the decision-making process. As soon as the state allowed us to go to the parental choice, I mean, I went to it the next day. We were the only district in the Acadiana region that went to it that quickly. And I made that decision specifically because I knew how it was affecting parents. Based on the calls I was getting. I mean, on more than one occasion, I had a parent crying because, Mr. Blanchard, I'm gonna lose my job. My kid's been quarantined twice already. If I miss any more work, they're gonna fire me. So that's an important thing. I know a lot of people don't like the mask. But when you have other people calling you and telling you that they're gonna lose their job because their child is quarantined, that has to be taken into consideration too. Nearly half of the quarantine cases came from the buses when we were using the 6-foot rule. When that changed, our quarantine numbers began to decline. When the parental choice thing came in, it declined significantly. With parental choice, all we have to do is quarantine the child that is sick or symptomatic. Okay? Another thing that has helped a lot, next slide, please, is that we purchased test kits. Okay, we didn't always have access to rapid molecular tests. A molecular PCR test is the only one that you can use to determine whether a child can come back to school or not. Okay. We were able to purchase them. We purchased a large number of them. We purchased the machines that read it. We have at least 2 at every health center. We have 1 in Groveridge High and 1 in Parks because of those distances. Okay. In the last couple of weeks, or since we got them, we've tested in excess of 120 students, and only 2 of those have come back positive. One of the major problems we face throughout all of this is a kid will come to school and start exhibiting symptoms. We contact the parent comes to pick them up. Very often, the parent does not want to take them to get tested. So you have to treat them like a positive, which means you got to quarantine the kids around them. Okay? Now that we have the rapid test available in the schools, we can test them free of charge with no inconvenience to the parent and have the results back within an hour. Okay? This is what we are required to do now. If we keep the mask, we follow the rules we're using right now. And right now we have about 30, 35 kids out of school parish-wide because of COVID versus over 400 just a few weeks ago. If you eliminate the mask, you gotta go back to the 6-foot rule. Okay? In either case, you may use the shortened quarantine, where the student can return on day 8 if they receive a negative test on day 5, 6, or 7. Okay? Or if they refuse to go get tested, they can return on day 11 with no symptoms. And again, this is kind of a quick and dirty look. There's more to the rules than that, but this is the most important part. Okay? And the mask mandate on buses is a presidential national mandate, so the governor, or myself, or anybody does not have the authority to lift that except for the president. Next slide. So this is my recommendation based on this information and what we've been seeing and observing. That we continue to wear the mask on the bus because it is a presidential mandate and we don't have the authority to lift it. It allows us to continue to use the 3-foot rule on the bus, and it allows us to continue to use parental choice. Keep in mind that about half of our quarantines were coming off of the buses. Okay. So if the student will wear the mask 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever it is, to school and back home in the afternoon, that should almost completely eliminate quarantines from the bus. Once a kid gets to school and gets in the building, the mask becomes voluntary. They don't have to wear it if they don't want to. Okay? And then we follow the LDH guidelines for the 6-foot quarantine rule. We can use the short quarantine rule. And we just monitor. If the quarantine numbers begin to rise beyond acceptable levels, okay, we reinstate the mask mandate for a short period of time, allow the numbers to come back down. After 8 or 10 days, you review the numbers. If they've come back down and the kids are returning to school, then you can remove the mask again. The most important thing to me, well, the 2 most important things, number 1 is safety and security of the staff and students. Second thing is keeping our students in school. Students are not engaging and not participating in the virtual programs when they're at home. We've done home visits. In some cases, we're even getting the DA's office involved, and they are not participating. We meet with parents. We tell them, students are not logging on, they're not doing their work, they're coming back to school and they have all zeros. And in far too many cases, we're getting a response from parents where they say, well, let them fail. Okay, that's really not an option. Okay, so it's important that we have them sitting in the classroom where they're doing their work and they're attending. In addition to that, a very large percentage of our parents get up and go to work every morning. They need their children in school, they need to know where they're at and that they're safe, so they can go to work and come home in the evening. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. What do I need from parents in the community to make this work? I'm gonna be sending out a letter in the next couple of days with every child, asking parents to do the following. Number one, don't send your child to school if you know they're sick. If they have any of the COVID symptoms, keep them home. Either call your doctor and get an alternate diagnosis so that the child can return to school, or contact the health center and we will test them for free. We've purchased, at a cost of in excess of $30,000, the rapid molecular tests that I mentioned, and they're the new type that's non-intrusive. All you do is go right inside the nostril, you swab around 4 or 5 times, you seal it in a little packet, and they can do that. They drive up to the health center, they can do it in the parking lot. If we do it at school with a child, the parent doesn't have to come, all they have to do is give us consent. We'll do it at school, the child remains in the office, the swab will be picked up by the health center bus, brought to the health center, dropped in the machine. So within an hour of swabbing the child, we should have a result. The results are supposed to take about a half an hour. If you include travel time, no more than an hour. Okay? And as I mentioned earlier, we've tested about 120 kids so far, only 2 have come back positive. The problem we were having in the fall is we could not get people to bring their children either to the doctor or to get tested. There was a charge to do it, or people couldn't leave work, all that other stuff. So we've taken that difficulty away. We can do it at no charge. And again, one of the complaints I heard is, you gotta go all the way up and almost into their brain to get a swab. Not anymore. It's the new type that's non-intrusive. Okay? You're gonna ask parents, remind their children whenever possible, stay 6 feet away from other people so you aren't identified as a close contact. You don't get exposed. Now, that's not always possible. Most of our classrooms have 20 to 30 kids in them. It's at best you can get kids maybe 3 feet apart. Okay, so it's not always possible, but when possible, try to do that. The other thing is for parents to allow their children to get tested at school if they show the symptoms. And you can see the last 3 bullets there for what I just mentioned earlier. The recommendation I'm making to the board is what was in this previous slide. We keep the mask in place on the bus because it's mandated. And we go to removing the mask in school and monitor the numbers. The numbers go up, you start getting 5, 6, 7, 8% of your students out, you reinstate the mask for a short period of time, let the numbers come back down, and then remove it a couple of weeks later when the numbers are accepted. And that's my recommendation.
Question, Mr. Lawyer. When you said 5%, and you and I spoke about this, you're not talking about 5% of the parishes, 5% of that school or that area where it's.
I'm glad you pointed that out. Yeah, it's by school. If Brobridge Junior High has a spike, then we put the mask on only at Brobridge Junior High. The other schools aren't affected unless they're in the school. It's not by parish, it's by school.
I'll say.
Yeah, you have any questions? Well, motion by Ms. Vito, second by Mr. Davis.
That's it.
Ms. Andrews, and Ms. Davis.
And that's the follow staff
That's the fast verification, that means, if the percentage is over 5%, you'll have to.
They have to
wear a mask.
May I say something?
I'm like, you didn't get caught, I'm this way, I don't know, I barely wear masks. I think it should be on a voluntary basis. If I know my kid gonna go to school, they wanna be around people and they get catch, some type of flu, whatever, put the mask. Well, I know my kids probably won't catch that, so be it.
That's what it says.
You have a question in
You made that as a motion, Richard.
Well, I'm not making a motion, I'm just saying, can make a motion.
I'm making a motion that it has to be voluntary.
Volunteer.
They can do it.
Excuse me, may I say something?
You just been, you.
Have any of y'all ever looked on the boxes that y'all buy the mask in? Because I've bought 3 of them. And when you look in the back of them, every one of them says, this does not protect from a virus. Have y'all ever done that?
Ma'am, if you don't mind, state your name. So,
I am Tammy Duarlo from Catahoula. And I have heard multiple doctors say that these young kids, their oxygen is being, it's not going to their brain wearing these masks. I don't think that these young children should be wearing these masks all day long, 8 hours a day, breathing constantly the stuff that's in them. I just think that this is abuse. This is abuse. For 8 hours a day in a classroom. And it would be effective, but it's not effective. Y'all go and get y'all all a box and y'all turn it around and y'all look. And y'all gonna see this does not protect from viruses. That's all I have.
So, we have a motion by the veto.
What did this,
Not to not.
Ms. Knight, do you have a comment? You wanted to add something to the
I
motion?
didn't make, I made a motion, I didn't get a second.
Well, what was the motion being here? She amended it.
Voluntary.
Voluntary?
But it is
Oh, yeah,
voluntary.
no.
It is voluntary.
Except on the bus. Except on the bus, it's mandatory. It's already voluntary.
Chances of kids getting COVID is 99.9.
Okay.
Well, I just have one comment about the mask. And I'm pretty sure everybody knows how I feel about it. I'm not a big believer in it. I go through a lot of people. But the thing that got my attention about the mask, and I gotta give you credit, Mrs. Blanchard. You're a lot better person than me, because I probably lost my cool a lot of times, because I feel like the people, but sometimes you have to do things in order to protect the system, and I respect you for that. And anybody who did it. Now, as far as what the president and the governor does, I can go on and on, but just for the president and the governor, that mask, I know of an employee in Lafayette Parish who teaches at a poverty school. And she's always dealing with these kids day in, day out. Those kids walk in with that same mask that they walk in today, they're gonna walk in with it again tomorrow, 3 months from now. It's the same mask. And then they drop on the floor, they put it back on. It could be anywhere. And again, that's out of the teacher's control. But I mean, it just goes to show those two that are leading the country and the state that the mask is, I mean, it is what it is, but it just goes to show you that that mask isn't all that. And again, a lot of people agree with this young lady said, but I mean, it is what it is. But I'm done.
I agree with Mr. Blanchard.
All right,
It's optional.
so, Mr. Knight made a motion, that he didn't get a second.
I second.
But
I agree with you. They have to wear it on the
you
bus.
know what Mr. Knight's motion is?
Well, everybody got
Okay,
their
you
own
second,
opinion.
so Mr. Mott have a substitute motion. We'll vote the substitute motion first.
Yeah, I'd like clarification.
Yeah, I want to make sure we're on.
I'd like clarification on exactly what the motion is.
His motion, I believe, is the mask is voluntary.
Well, that's what he's.
My recommendation.
No,
The bus is
the bus is
mandated.
mandated.
You have no choice.
Are you
You have
gonna
no
make
choice on the bus.
The bus is mandated. If you hit the school, it's voluntary.
It's volunteer.
If you, I don't know that the board has the right to override the governor or the presidential.
I don't.
Why you should not. There's been a lot of this, if I could just have a moment. There's been a lot of discussion on that. Okay, and whatever my personal opinion on the mask is, I do have an opinion. And I don't know, it might surprise some people exactly to what it is. But I also know, based on speaking to different legal counsel, that there are consequences for not following. legal consequences. If you're sued and you're not following, you lose all protections. So the district is protected when you follow the recommendations of the LDH, whether you agree with the guidelines or not. The second thing is, the decisions I'm making, the recommendation I'm making, is in an attempt, number one, to try to do what's right. I know a lot of people don't want to wear the mask. I'm not a big fan of it myself. However, when you start having 400 and 500 and 600 kids out of school, at one time we had 50% of Burbridge High's population out of school on 2-week quarantine. And those kids, some of them are going to be graduating this year, and they have to pass the EOC to graduate. When they're not at school, they're not learning. So there's got to be a balance somewhere on what everybody wants and likes, and what we have to do to keep those kids in school and protect the district. So that is the basis of my recommendation. It allows to remove the mask in the building where we're allowed to do it. The numbers start getting too high, you put it back on for a little while so you can get everybody back in school. I've kind of given up, not say given up, but I'm not as worried about what our letter grade is going to look like at the end of the year. Okay? Because it's probably not going to be good. We have a lot of kids out, we're struggling with a lot of things, we have a lot of teachers out. We've got over 60 non-certified teachers in the district. And we actually fare a little bit better than some of the surrounding districts in the number of uncertified people. Okay? So, but what I am worried about is how is that going to affect our students next year, the year after, and the year after that? If you get a kid that's got to pass that Algebra 1 EOC test, and they fail it when they're taking Algebra 1, the likelihood of them coming back and passing it gets less and less every time they take it, the further they get away from Algebra 1. So, that's a real concern, and I don't like wearing a mask. If my kid's in Algebra 1, I want them in class so they can pass and graduate on time. All of that has to be taken into consideration. When you throw on top of that you have people in this community, people that are friends of all of ours, people that you may know, who, if they gotta keep going home because a kid is sick and quarantined again, they might lose their jobs. So my decision and my recommendation is made with all of those things in mind. I want the kids in school so parents can go to work and they can pass, while at the same time trying to follow the guidelines and keep everybody safe. My recommendation to the board is the mask is voluntary in the schools, in the buildings, and in the offices and everywhere, as long as the numbers remain low, and we follow the mandate on the bus. You violate that mandate and you open yourself up to all sorts of potential litigation. So that is my recommendation. If the board chooses to do something different, we will follow the directive of the board, but just realize you do it at a potential cost.
Okay, well, I have a question. We were voting on this.
We were voting
on staff's recommendation.
But then it's not made a motion.
Yeah, but there was no second.
And yeah, that's a second.
Well, what motion exactly?
Yeah, what is that motion? I don't
Well,
know.
basically the same way.
It's the same thing he's recommending, right?
But his supplemental motion was what you had already said.
If that's it, then I'm fine.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean, his secondary motion was no action on it.
What's the percentage increase, you talked about earlier, 5%?
Yes. If it gets up around between 5% and 6%, then we would consider putting the mask back on for 10 days.
It's not, state your motion.
Vote, kids attending school wear masks voluntarily.
That's regardless of the 5% or not.
You're not saying anything about the bus, right?
No, not about the bus.
You didn't say anything about the
5%.
Let's just go with staff.
We're talking about, did you say attendance school? Were you saying while they're on the bus, you want to be out there?
Second.
Are we drawing?
Yeah.
Well,
No, I'm not. Because it's not motion, it's regardless of the 5%, you still have.
Well, I think, yeah, if it's just in the back, that's what, the recommend.
You second that motion, you gotta wait for your second.
second.
Okay, just
It's-
there, got some clarification.
If it's not different than the first motion,
It is different.
what's different?
It's regardless of the 5%.
Oh, so you're saying it's voluntary period that
Right.
the superintendent doesn't have the option to impose the mask mandate if he gets the 5 to 6%. Is that the case? Yeah.
Let's go back to the original motion.
I'd like to make a substitute motion.
You would go, you,
I'd like to do a substitute motion. Go with Mr. Blanchard's recommendation, except increase it to 10%. And the 10%,
There's no percentage in the governor's guideline, that's just a number I had thought of.
that's the number he came up with.
Would you be okay with the 10%?
Whatever the other round. I wouldn't go higher than 10%.
No. And again, it's for that particular subject.
Which would be how many kids in 1,000? 100? I mean, the other way would be
motion
50.
by Mr. Dory,
That'd be more reasonable.
Dory. And it's by my second, that's the 10%. Motion died by lack of second.
Okay.
So we go back to the original motion.
Motion to accept staff recommendation.
Vote. All in favor? Any nays? Then motion carried. Vote number request, Mr. Lam. Ready, yes, vote? Yes, vote.
It's my turn, Richard.
Yes, sir.
Well, it's been a year since we voted on Head Start. And, well, no, I voted again. Some people think I'm anti-child care, I am not. It's just, I express my reasons why. Major reason is that I felt the program should be operated by a nonprofit organization, not the school board. I still feel the same way. And it's not, it's done a good job, it's provided all kind of stuff. It takes a long time to read all that stuff, from pages and pages. And it has affected other people. Our board agenda, we spend as much time on Head Start as we do on curriculum or regular together, the first grade too. So as a board member, we are spending a lot of time. Just before I came to when we saw how much there is on our agenda today for Head Start, but just as I left today, two things. I get an email from the board about the policy concept. And you know that I always read it, because I want to make sure that we are following the rules and we're not violating at home. Secondly, I open the test news, and there it is. School board being evicted from a building, I think that's the second one. There's been problems galore, not that are my problem, but we spend more time on Head Start than we do on K-12. We have had, as board members, not unemployed, as board members in the last 2 years, we've had to spend a lot of time, additional time, with the Justice Department. I generally call it the Injustice Department. We spend a lot of time. We spend a lot of time on Head Start. We spend a lot of time, additional time, that we didn't do 3 or 4 years ago on the virus. And then in the next few months, we're going to be tackling redistricting. Some of you think it's easy. I'm thinking, like 10 years ago, we had to postpone the election. So that's an awful lot of additional work this year for board members. It affects not only the board member, but every single employee. I think it is just too much. Now, we have no control over the Justice Department. We have no control over the virus, although it is seems to be winding down. We have no control over forming our districts, but our primary mission should be taking care of grades, kindergarten to 12th grade. Now, it affects, some of you may not, it affects everybody's workload, whether you're principal, cook, personnel, it affects our work. And I'm very, very concerned, just like a board member, 2 or 3 years ago, Mr. Barrett was concerned about school performance scores. Other members were very carefully. It is going to affect all this additional work is going to affect school performance scores, peers, and more higher. I don't know if they received them yet, but they're in the process of being received. Some of the grades are so bad that they're disguising them as number grades instead of A, B, C, D, and F. I'm going to ask the administration to convert those for me. They know how to do it from scores to A, B, C, D, and F. And when we get them, I can promise you, they are not going to be good for the parish of St. Martin. I might even help Mr. Ben, you write this point on also. Now, what can we do about Head Start? Well, we do have a 5-year commitment, I believe, right, 5 years. I believe in being proactive. I don't think we should wait 5 years. I think we ought to look at alternatives as soon as we can. I'm not going to make a motion next board meeting, but I'm going to request of the administration that they contact another firm by name of Prime Time Head Start and invite them to come make a presentation to the board, just so we know what they offer. If you're not familiar with that, I believe, and Smile is not awarded the grant. Lafayette, I believe, went with Prime Time, and so did Iberia. So they must have some good things to offer. I would just like to know what it is they have to offer. And no more just request the administration that they invite them over here. I have not contacted, I have no idea who they are, but I've heard good reports from reading the newspaper a few months ago, a few weeks ago. That's it.
Well,
Can I
I just
reply?
got 2 little things to rebuttal. School performance score, that's totally out, that's got nothing to do with it. Prime Time was awarded the bid just like St. Martin Parish. So for Lafayette to actually put in a request, our very parish put a request and didn't receive that program. Apparently St. Martin Parish had that stuff together. I guarantee you, and you don't want to invite Prime Time, it's totally different. It's totally different. Prime Time is nothing compared to St. Martin Parish School Board. That's the reason why they give St. Martin Parish School Board. Lafayette Parish and Iberia Parish also applied for the grant, didn't receive it. You ought to be happy that St. Martin Parish received it. You know, it was some good things going on. It was very, very good. I don't think that's the face to have Prime Time come here and try to get something that we already got. That's all. You got a comment?
I have comments, I'll wait till y'all.
You know, the last board meeting, I commented about her performance.
Yes, sir.
The reason why we have Head Start, it's that lady right there. You know, I feel that if you get the kids real early, and our principals can associate with the Head Start principal, and get them on the same track of learning, when they come into pre-K and first grade, they're gonna be on step, bro. That's why I feel that we need to keep Head Start to help these kids get going before they get to our schools. If Prime Time comes in, we don't know what they're gonna teach. We won't know what these kids are gonna need, because we don't have them in our system. If we have them in our system, we know what they need, know, just like with the mental health deal, we know which kids need help. So that's what my feeling is. I think we did a good job getting Head Start.
25 years ago, I remember there was a grant for pre-K. I know it was about 25 years ago because my granddaughter was one of the very first. It was going to help every student. It was going to, but statistics show that kids who, the early they get into those programs, by the time they're third, fourth grade, you can't tell that anymore there. Now, after 20-some-odd years of pre-K, again, has it helped kids when they graduate? I just simply said, let us look at the test, the school performance scores when they come in for this parish, and let us see how they compare with all the other parishes, and you are going to be shocked. The kids are not performing, our schools are not performing as well as they should be, all right?
Maybe this will help, Mr. Knight. Maybe this will help.
Nicole, I just want to point out, I've been staying in, you're not, it has nothing to do with you, you do a great job. I'm just not a proponent of Head Start, but the other thing, Steve, I respect your comments, and Mr. Knight, I respect yours. But until we get those parents, like I was talking about, the other parish, until you start getting those parents to start doing their job and teaching their kids homework and all this other, no matter what program we put in, it's not gonna work. I mean, that's my opinion, okay? Until those parents get involved, now, what can you do to get the parents involved? I have no idea, because let me tell you something, I'll work with them. Because they're just a challenge, you know, because if they're not gonna be concerned about their own child, like you are with your grandchildren. It's like all of us. Probably everyone in this room is probably concerned about their kids. But we're not the ones that have an issue. It's those that aren't, and again, I don't know what, we can put all these federal dollars in all these different programs until those parents have consequences to make those kids successful. I don't know, you know, I don't know what to say.
I like to say just one thing. First of all, as far as the statistics, I don't think they are statistics. Because with the corona, with the mandates that they put on us, with the teaching staff that we're losing, the students not going to school because of their virtual social and all of this, how can you put statistics on it? Same thing with our zoning, if you want to put zoning in this thing. How can they put a rezone when half the people weren't even counted?
They didn't do the census.
No, so how are you gonna put it in the census, you know? So that all this stuff is being made up. I think starting, we got this under control. I think we gotta go from there and work our way and do our best. That's all we need to do. Do our best with education. Forget about these numbers at the end of the year. All we need to do is take those kids from where they are and bring them as far as we can. And then once we get back to normality, if there is such a thing nowadays, once we get back to normality, then we can start teaching again, and then we can start looking at schools.
Yeah, because even the state has acknowledged that those children that went to school during the pandemic, their scores are gonna be,
For sure.
and those that stayed home and didn't do anything, 0. It's, I mean, and that's where all the schools are gonna drop at. And that's not just our parish, that's state, that's not just one.
Okay, Ms. Odell?
No, I'm good.
1 minute.
No, I'm good. Y'all did a great job. Thank you.
May I say something
Yes, ma'am.
right quick?
Go ahead.
Ms. Angel, I think you're doing a splendid job,
Thank you, sir.
because I've been in the parish for 8 years, and I always wished that we would take some early childhood ticket with the public school, because our children would have the same curriculum. When they would go in kindergarten, it follows up, and they know the path. By then, we smile help too, but this program that they have now, it's not good. I hear a lot of my friends telling me they wish that they would accomplish the grant that you all have in St. Louis Parish. They want it, but they don't know how to get it. They sure want it. So I have to compliment you for that. They can't get it. And that's an honor for St. Louis Parish to have that.
Okay. And we move on to the next item, executive session, you have anything?
We have the negotiations with Jewel.
Okay, motion, this is a motion to accept, motion by second by Steve, all in favor?
And then,
I was one of your first.